Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative White will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, before I lead us in prayer, I want to share a story with you, if I may. It was September of 1774, and 45 delegates came from across the colonies at that time to meet in Philadelphia. And it was during a time of crisis in our country whenever the colonists and Great Britain, they were having some tax issues, and so it was brewing at this time. So the colonies selected 45 delegates from the individual colonies, and they sent them to Philadelphia. Now, at this time, most of these men, nobody knew anything about except for their own colony. So they came together, and some of the names began to be popular, such as George Washington, John Adams, Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, John Jay of New York, John Rutledge of South Carolina, and Jacob Duché of Philadelphia. Now, all these men that came together, as we know during this time, they were great men of faith. But each had settled in a colony that had a particular religious belief, and they had their own particular act of worship. There were the Quakers and the Puritans, the Episcopalians, the Anabaptists, the Congregationalists, and the Presbyterians. So when they came together as all people of faith, it was recommended that they open the session in prayer. But guess what? There was objection. Not because any of them believed in the power of prayer, but because they were coming together and they knew that their religious differences were such that if they had a prayer by any one person, that it may cause disunity at a time when they had to have unity as they were marching towards the next 2 years, to 1776. But their objection after much debate was overcome, and Jacob Duché was asked to lead the prayer. He prayed that they would have unity over what they had in common, with what they had in common. And what that one prayer did, it set a tone of unity for the next 2 years as those 45 delegates met leading up to July 4th of 1776. My point being this, it was prayer that brought them together. So why do I tell this story? Because each of us have been called into special session to deal with the issues of our day, 250 years hence. For us, it is not the tyranny of another nation, but is that each of us come from a particular belief and thought. But what unified this First Continental Congress was a belief that above all else, they were servants of one God. So this week, I call on each of us to humble ourselves before the God that we all confess to believe in. I believe that if we truly humble ourselves before God, we can accomplish good for the people of Tennessee. But I do want to stress this. No one person's voice is any less than anyone else's on this floor. But then again, no one person's voice should be any louder or deemed to be more important. We are all equal. As God told Elijah in 1 Kings, God's voice is not in the earthquake or the storms or in the fire of chaos and confusion. God speaks to each of us in that quiet, still whisper. God is in the whisper, not in the confusion and the loudness of chaos. So let's bow our heads in prayer. Holy Father, you are the God of all creation, so we come before you and humble ourselves before you. As you said in Psalms 37, trust in the Lord and do good. Then you will live safely in the land and prosper. Father, it is our desire that Tennessee prosper and that the people live in safety. And the innocence of her children's lives will be under your divine protection. So we today call down your Holy Spirit to fill this chamber today and for the rest of this week, and that each person also have your Spirit. For you alone are God, and there is no other. Fill us with your wisdom and discernment to make wise decisions and may your peace that passes all understanding have the victory in this session. So I call down your divine protection at this time over this chamber and over this assembly and over this state. I call down your divine protection on every school-age child in Tennessee as they are returning to school. Protect every child, every teacher, every administrator from any and all acts of evil. Bless Tennessee to be the example to our nation that righteousness exalteth the nation, and mutual respect will solve the divisions of our time. Today, we have the choice of, shall we choose to listen and obey your commands, or do we choose to reject your commands? Well, I ask that we choose to obey and that your eternal spirit govern this special sessions. And I ask it through the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Representative White will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Let journal reflect that Representatives Dixie and Hurt are excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to dispense with the reading of the governor's proclamation.
You've heard the motion, probably seconded. Without objection, so ordered. Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you have had available to you for the last several hours the ad hoc committee on rules recommendation to you. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the ad hoc committee on rules be adopted as the permanent rules of order for the House of Representatives for the first extraordinary session of the 113th General Assembly.
You've heard the motion, properly seconded. Discussion. Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are we going to be allowed to ask questions about these rules?
Lear Lamberth.
Yes, and in fact, Representative Garrett was going to kind of just run down and explain those. If he could be next on the list, Mr. Speaker, procedurally, we are now on the rules and can debate and discuss those for as long as we like.
Chairman Clemens.
And this vote will go on the board, Mr. Speaker?
That's customary option, yes. Chairman Clemens.
Thank you. I just want to make it clear. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Representative Garrett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to present the rules from the Rules Committee, which were taken up today at 10 o'clock and voted on, and they were unanimously passed out of that committee. So a couple of summations on the various different changes to the rules. The first will be that what we typically refer to as the FLOMO motion, that'll be part of our permanent rules of order for this special session. So any bills will be subject to what we typically consider as the flow motion. That'll be part of the permanent rules of the extraordinary session. Getting to specific rules, under rule number 2, there is a change that will not allow any microphone that records on the House. That's under rule number 2. The second rule is under rule number 2 is that if there's a material disruption caused in the House, that material disruption will be determined by the Speaker, and the House will decide that material disruption case without debate. If that material disruption is found to be indeed a material disruption of the House, the first offense is that you will not be recognized for 3 legislative days. The second offense for that material disruption, you will not be recognized for 6 legislative days. And if you are found in material disrupting the House for a third offense, you will not be recognized for the rest of that annual session. This rule does not affect a member's ability to vote on the floor. Under rule number 4 bans voice and noise amplification devices, flags, signs, and banners from the galleries. Under rule number 18, the change here is the member, as we discuss legislation from this well, if the member who asks questions somehow gets off the debate and they are called out of order for not being on topic, that member forfeits their time. If the member is called on the speaker for a second time for being off topic, that will be sustained and be voted upon by the House on the board. If that order is sustained, the member will not be recognized for the rest of that legislative day. A third offense for being called out of order, for being off of topic from the legislation currently pending before the House, that also will be on the board, and you'll be suspended for 3 legislative days of discussing anything on the floor for those 3 legislative days. A fourth time you are out of order for material disruption determined by the speaker, you will not be recognized for the remaining annual session. Again, this will not affect any voting members' abilities on the floor. Under Rule 18, also there's a change. The member calls another by name when you are in or answering questions to a speaker, to the person in the well, and you mention someone else's name, that person immediately can be called upon and respond with a 1-minute response. And when you name that person's name, you forfeit your time on the floor if you call out another member's name on the floor. Under Rule 21, Rule 21 was amended by Representative Jernigan, and the committee accepted his amendment. That amendment allows 2 additional minutes for the speaker or the person that's in the well if their 5 minutes is used up. And what it also does is if there's a question for the person in the well, and then they respond, and that takes up the entire 5 minutes of debate, the person that asked the question gets a 2-minute rebuttal in response. That's under Rule number 21 that was brought by Representative Jernigan on the Rules Committee. Under Rule number 35, it adds that voice or noise amplification devices are now considered a prop rule and are prohibited. Rule number 60 sets the amendment filing deadline for the floor. In order to be considered timely, amendments must be filed at least 4 hours prior to the start of the session. Rule number 65 names the standing committees, which they'll be announced in short order. Then it removes the designation of the leaders on the GovOps committee. Those leaders must serve on that committee. Rule number 83 is a new section for our committee system. If there is someone that's held out of order on a committee, then that chairman of the committee can appoint an ad hoc committee. They'll be composed of our Speaker Pro Tem, the 2 leaders from the majority, and the 2 leaders from the minority, and they will make disciplinary recommendations to the Speaker or to the House when a member is ruled out of order in committee for impugning the reputation of another member or disrupting the committee or the House. Section 83 is just renumbered to reflect that new section number 20. There's a new rule.
Representative Garrett, you are out of time. First up, Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just wanted to ask a question first. I think I heard you say when you started that this passed out of the Ad Hoc Rules Committee unanimously. Is that correct?
Representative Garrett.
That's right. Yes. The final rule package passed unanimously.
Representative Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for that. And I appreciate the work. And I know y'all put a lot into this to get to this point. And I appreciate the work and the bipartisanship in which this was done, the nature that it was done. And appreciate the committee considering what Representative Jernigan brought. And I know many others brought comments and concerns to you. So thank you for your time on that.
Representative Garrett. Anything? No, sir. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I don't think I will be impugning the member's reputation by calling him a lawyer. You're not lawyering us right now, are you?
Representative Garrett.
Not at all.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question about number 2, about recording devices. Or can you read it one more time and explain it again, please?
Leader Lambert.
So we're going to take turns here a little bit, if that's all right. I chaired the Rules Committee. Representative Garrett presented this package, or at least part of it, and Representative Jernigan as well. So specifically, there's no wearing or possessing of a microphone on the House floor. There's no need for that. These work just fine. And there's no, you're not allowed to use audio-visual recording, live streaming, broadcasting, similar to what we've had in the rules before. This just includes sound amplification and or recording equipment on the House floor.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when you were speaking about a microphone, are you talking about like a hidden microphone or something? What are we talking about?
Leader Lambert.
There's not a distinction in the rules on that hidden, open. It wouldn't matter. It's just you can't have a recording device on the House floor to be recording these proceedings. They are recorded through the live stream for all to hear.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Leader. And does that rule only apply to members, or does that apply to staff? Does it apply to media that's on the House floor?
Leader Lambert.
That is members and staff. Anybody that's on this House floor does not need to have a recording device and be recording folks. Again, that is recorded through this microphone and, is live broadcast for all to hear.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Leader. There are members of the media that are on the House floor also. Does that rule pertain to them?
Leader Lambert.
No, sir, it does not. Members of the media are allowed whatever devices that they have as part of their professional lives.
Representative Parkinson.
Final question. When you say no recording devices on the House floor, are we talking about while we're in session, or are we talking about during presentations, or are we talking about even when session is out and we're still on the House floor?
Leader Lambert.
So it would be while we were in session. I mean, if we were not in session and someone wanted to come up here and they did that properly, then it would not apply to that circumstance. Or if they were in a committee room, you probably have given interviews at different times in a committee room that's empty. As long as you go through the proper channels for that, this doesn't affect any of that. It's just while that committee's in session, while we are in session here on the floor.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you for that. And what I was talking about is like if we're here and session has not started, but we're all in the room, I just want to make sure that everything was clear. So this is about when session has been gavelled in. I appreciate that. Am I clear on that?
Leader Lambert.
Yeah, until it's gavelled in, until we begin session, this would not apply.
Representative Parkinson.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Either sponsor. First of all, let me say it's been a privilege to serve on rules. Certainly, I enjoyed our conversation this morning. I thought we had a good, robust conversation. However, I did not vote on the rules that were added this morning, as you know, and I gave my reason why, because I thought that being a legislator and representing 70,000+ people, it's my responsibility to just conduct myself as a legislator on this floor. I appreciate those members who sent me here having enough confidence in me to come up here and act right. And that's my responsibility. I said this morning, when I walk through that door, and if I say good morning and nobody responds, that's okay. I've done my duty. I spoke. When I come in this legislative body and keep my peace and act like I should act, if nobody else does it, I've done my duty. And I think when we put this in the hands of, in this case, about 97 other members to decide basically what we're talking about doing, that we may be overlooking some things, because what I think is offensive, you may or may not think is offensive. I just believe that it is the speaker's responsibility to call me out of order if I'm out. And after so many times, whatever that rule is, he should have a right to call security and lead me out of this chamber if I don't act right. I think that's his responsibility. I also think it's the responsibility of each caucus to talk to their members and say, this is what you can and what you cannot do on the House of Representatives. I think that's the way we should handle this, but when we start saying that people can come and cannot come and who can do this, I think the comment was made this morning, this is the people's house. It belongs to them. And we are the people's servants, and we ought to act like that. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, whether you are Kool-Aid or whatever you are, you have a responsibility to act right on this floor. And that's the reason why I did not vote for these additional rules, not because I'm against someone or against you or don't like you. I highly respect you, Mr. Leader, and the presenter of these rules. You all are my colleagues. Whether you like me or not, you're my colleagues. We work together every day, and we ought to be able to do that without having to make rules that affect people that it should not affect. And that's the reason I didn't vote for these additional rules. However, I did vote for rule number 21, I believe. But I just think it's a personal responsibility of the people we represent back in our districts to come up here and to act like legislators and agree and disagree. And even if we disagree, I still should be your colleague. I should still talk to you. I should still speak to you, for the lack of a better word. And I just don't see any need for this extra stuff. We just need to put people in their place when they're out of place. Thank you for letting me have the comments.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative, thank you for those comments. And to be crystal clear, I mean, again, the rules package came out unanimously, but there are aspects to the package that different members of the Rules Committee definitely voted against as it was coming through. So there are parts of this that were voted no on. And so there were members that had objections, and I'm sure they can renew those objections on the floor now. But the rules package is a full package that came out of the Rules Committee. It's not piecemeal, it's one large package. I do want to read just Article 2, Section 12. Each House may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3, expel a member, but not a second time, for the same offense, and shall have all other powers necessary for a branch of the legislature of a free state. The Speaker does not have the authority to remove a member. And so I understand your point, but that is our job. It is our responsibility, if a member is violating these particular rules, to determine what would be available. And I, for one, definitely support this rules package. I think it allows for small responses. Another 5. Thank you. I think we were still on the last bit of time there. So I think it allows for a multitude of different options if a member violates the rules, whereas now literally the only thing available is censure or expulsion. That's all that's allowed in the Constitution. So this provides for additional options for you if you choose to utilize them. It would be up to a vote of this body to do so.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These rules scare me. They scare me as an American who believes in a free state and democracy. We did not come up here for this special session to limit speech of the members of this body. We came up here to tackle a problem, or at least some of us thought we were going to, with gun violence that is impacting this state, that has killed countless people and school children. And instead, we're starting off amending the rules of this body to limit our democracy. It's ridiculous. This is absurd. This is absurd. Shame on every single one of you who voted for these rules. Shame on you. You're going material? What is the definition of material? We can't even debate that in the rules. It goes up on the board, and we limit somebody who sent me up here to represent thousands and thousands of Tennesseans silence for 3 days. I speak again. The supermajority rules me out again. I'm silenced for more. Again, I'm silenced indefinitely. Outrageous. This is outrageous. I can't believe this. We should have come up here and adopted rules to put people back on committees that should never have been stripped off committees. That's what we should be voting on. I can't believe this. This is an affront to representative democracy. I am ashamed that we are sitting here discussing this. And then there's so many issues with this. Oh, I got to file an amendment, so the clerk's office, you're going to be open at 5 a.m. when session starts at 9 for me to file my amendment? I think this is a dangerous step that we are taking. I thought it was a dangerous step the minute I pulled in the garage and I saw the halls of this chamber with more people with batons than people that were here to speak the truth and fight for justice. We've limited the people that can come up here and be in the gallery. We've given this side, I see chairs up there, yet the people are being kept outside. They can't come in. We have a press box for the press. I love the press, but this is for the people, not the press.
Representative Powell, we're on the rules. You're going off the rules. We're debating the rules package before you. If you want to get back to the rules, that'd be great, Representative Powell.
I'm discussing the rules. This is the problem with the rules.
Representative Powell, no, you weren't addressing the rules. You need to stay on the rules, please, Representative Powell.
Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about the rules. The problem is, again, you are making the interpretation that I am off the rules. I think I am well on the rules. I'm discussing the rules that are here. But you know what? All of a sudden, I can be silenced for 3 days. The people of the 53rd District can be silenced for 3 days. And this is outrageous to me. I would ask my colleagues to vote against these rules. Let's do the work of the people. The people have called and begged us to tackle the issue. Let's do the issue at hand. Let's not start off this special session by limiting democracy. It's a very, very scary and slippery slope to go down. There are so many problems with this rules as I look through them again and again. And you know what? Not only can you be ruled out of order and not limited to speak, but maybe that first time people say, you know what? We want Representative Powell out of here. We're sick of him. You can still do that. You can still do that. You can silence me, and then you can just kick me out. That's right there in the rules. I'd ask members to vote no.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, sir. And we've served together for 11 years, and anytime you make any statement on the floor, it is always important to me. I listened to your statements today, and I could not disagree more strongly. This is very simple and straightforward. Don't cause a material disruption. Stay on the topic of the bill. And at the end of the day, don't impugn another member or this body. Stick to the bill. Stick to the policy. The folks that are here in the gallery and that have come down here for a special session that the governor have called have asked us to debate important issues. Let's stay on the issues. Let's not insult each other and impugn another member or the body. Let's do the work that we've been asked to come here and do. And if for some reason some member does not choose to stay within these rules, there are measured steps That is democracy, sir. That is literally democracy. We listen to each other in debate. We vote the conscience of our district, and we make decisions that hopefully will make Tennessee a better place after we finish than before. This is simply a structure to do that.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader Lambert, I just had Leader Garrett, I just had a couple of quick questions. Under the rules of order from the last Tennessee General Assembly or the last session, if someone violated the rules, what options were available to them or to this body? I think there are two.
Representative Garrett.
Yes, the only options are censure and expulsion.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And so if we adopt these rules, I heard time after time after time after time again in the spring, we only have two options. We can censure somebody or we can expel them. This body chose to expel people because they couldn't follow the rules. So what you're saying is we've adopted new rules to give this body additional options, which they didn't have months ago, and those on the other side of the aisle are complaining that we actually gave them what they asked for. Is that what I'm understanding?
Representative Garrett.
That's exactly right.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Section 4 of the rules, I think this was the same rule as it was before. There is a new line that's added at the end. In that rule, it talks about things that people can bring or participate in the galleries. They can bring items or items that are prohibited in the gallery. And I heard you say galleries before. Many in this body serve as chairman or subcommittee chairman or something like that. The question is just for clarity's purposes, were any of those things available or is it only applied to the House floor or is it to the House floor and the committees? Because based upon the verbiage of the last sentence, it looks like it may only be the House floor.
Leader Lambert.
All right. So in consulting with the clerk, in absence of something else in the committee, this would apply in the committees as well. That falls under the committee policies, and when it is silent as to that, then whatever is applicable to the House floor is also applicable to the committees.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So further clarify, if my wife chooses to come to committee and she holds this up in a committee, this would be prohibited if adopted by these rules. Similarly, it would be adopted or prohibited in the House gallery. Is that correct?
Leader Lambert.
Yes, sir. No voice or noise amplification devices, flags, signs, or banners shall be permitted in the galleries of the House of Representatives, and according to the clerk, consequently, then in the committees themselves.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Final question. If someone follows the rules of decorum in this House, and they follow the rules clearly, and they show respect to their colleagues, and they ask questions and stay germane to the topic, do those people get censured according to these rules?
Representative Garrett.
Absolutely not.
Representative Williams.
For 1 hour?
Representative Garrett. Representative Williams.
One day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You sat down.
We're already starting off on the wrong foot. These rules talk about ruling a member out of order and silencing their voices, but my question is, where in the rules can we find a process to hold the speaker out of order when he misapplies the rules to members? Where in these rules can we rule the speaker out of order when he shuts off members' microphones so they have to bring a megaphone to the House floor? Where in these rules can we hold the speaker accountable when he pushes members to the back so we have to walk up to the front of the well? Where in these rules can we hold the speaker accountable for abusing constitutional rights and misapplying the rules based off of a member's skin color as opposed to treating every member in this body as an equal member? You can boo, but the truth will be told
That's
today.
out of order. That's out of order. Next. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Speaker and every member on this floor is accountable under the exact same rules that the rest of us are.
Thank you. Representative Mitchell, you're recognized. Sorry, sir, you were out of order. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah,
Representative Mitchell, your time starting.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hey,
Representative Mitchell.
So the two gentlemen standing at the well, both of you are attorneys, correct?
Leader Lambert.
Yes, sir, that is our profession, each of us.
Representative Mitchell.
So to go along same lines of my learned colleague from South Nashville, don't want to say his name, God forbid, talking about government and democracy, there's different branches of government. Representative was talking about the legislative branch. Both of you guys' profession are in the judicial branch, correct? So your job is to vigorously advocate for your client as much as you can in a court of law. And I would say over the years, you've probably been ruled out of order by a judge in the past in the courtroom, both of you. So let's just do this scenario in another branch of government, that you get ruled out of order in a court of law, and all of a sudden the judge tells you for the next 3 days of this trial, you can't defend or advocate for your client. Let's just think of how damn ridiculous that is.
Out of order, balcony. You have to refrain from disrupting the proceedings. Representative Mitchell.
So that is just absurd, just to even think of that in another branch of government. So now we're going to come to this branch of government, and our clients are 75,000 Tennesseans that we're all supposed to be up here defending vigorously. You may be from a different part of the state, different views, different political background. You have that right, and I'll fight to the last breath to give you the right to speak up and say whatever you want to defend your folks. But for you to silence someone else just because you don't want to hear it, you don't want to defend, to defend your position, because sometimes, let's be honest, your positions sometimes are defenseless. And to do that for an attorney to stand up there before us and say this sort of thing is comical. It's really comical. But I do have another question, since, I'm glad the representative from the Plateau area brought up we can't bring in any signs. So we can't bring any signs in here. We can't bring any signs into committees. So I'm just want to verify, can people still bring guns into committees? Is that still,
Balcony, next warning, you all get removed. Representative Mitchell.
I asked, can we still bring guns into Cordell Hall and into committee rooms?
Representative Garrett.
There's a lot to what the representative from Davidson County just said. And what makes us Americans, what makes us Tennesseans? It's the rule book. The rule book is our Constitution that we agree to abide by. It only works if we agree to those rules and abide by that as Tennesseans and Americans. In a court of law, for my friend from Davidson County, there's civil rules of procedure. If you're in a criminal court, there's criminal court rules of procedure. If you violate those, that judge can certainly slap you in contempt, put you in jail. Therefore, you can't advocate for your client. You can't stand in court and plead for their case. Here should be the same thing. You can't stand here, abide by our rules, that what makes us all representatives of this great house. We can't do that. Why have any rules? Why it be just chaos? Why have anything? Why be able to stand here and advocate for our constituents in any manner whatsoever. As long as we abide by the rules that we put place in this house, we are going to get things done for our constituents back home. If we have none, the judge could hold me in contempt and throw me in jail. That's not the solution that our constituents elected us to do. When we all abide by the rules, we are all Tennesseans and we are all Americans, because our rules are the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Tennessee.
Chairman Clemens. Your 5 minutes is up. Chairman Clemens. Representative Mitchell, you're out of order. Chairman Clemens, your time is starting. You have 5 minutes.
The clock's not supposed to start until I start speaking.
Well,
That's the rule. That's the rules we're working under. All right, I have some questions here, legally based. Who makes the decision under Rule 2 as to whether a disruption is material or not?
Representative Garrett.
The Speaker.
Chairman Clemens.
Under Rule 18, who makes the decision whether a member's remarks fail to strictly conform to the question under debate?
Representative Garrett.
The body.
Chairman Clemens.
Who puts that vote to the body?
Representative Garrett.
Excuse me, the Speaker will put the vote on the board for whether or not the ruling of being out of order is sustained. That'll be a vote on the board.
Chairman Clemens.
And that is an objection made from the body or from the Speaker?
Representative Garrett.
That is actually the procedure that the rules promulgate. So it's not a choice of the Speaker. That is what the rules say, that it has to go on the board.
Chairman Clemens.
Okay, and then there's my previous colleagues have expressed their displeasure, with which I strongly agree, as to silencing the voices of their constituents for a certain amount of days and time for being ruled out of order, whether by the Speaker or by this body. Explain to me how 3 days, 6 days, or any of those specified amounts of time were decided upon.
Representative Garrett.
For one, let's be clear. We have rules here that we're voting on. If a member decides to break the rules, they are silencing themselves, not this House. They are silencing themselves by breaking the rules. What came out of that 3, 6, 8 day was the deliberation of the Rules Committee.
Chairman Clemens.
3, 6, regardless of how much time is specified, it seems quite arbitrary. So I want to know how 3 days versus 6 days versus whatever amount of time was decided upon.
Representative Garrett.
That was deliberation from the Rules Committee.
Chairman Clemens.
So what exactly is the compelling governmental interest in silencing over 70,000 Tennesseans' voices by an arbitrary decision of the Speaker or this body voting along political lines for an arbitrary amount of time? What's that compelling governmental interest?
Leader Lambert.
Well, that's a complete mischaracterization of what this is. No one is silenced. Anybody can step right outside of this chamber, say whatever they want to the news. They can make any type of video and put it on social media. They can make any kind of statement. They can say anything you want to. Any member in here can. But when you're on this floor, there are rules that we have to abide by, so that your voice and my voice are heard. If we're both just yelling and screaming over each other, not like we are doing right now, a back and forth, then democracy does die, because you can't have a reasoned, learned, and just reasonable debate about something. So these are very reasonable rules to try to make sure that that debate happens smoothly. Just like has been mentioned in a courtroom, and you, sir, as well are a lawyer, but the judge ensures that the lawyers, the witnesses, everyone in that courtroom follows certain rules so that the interest of justice are made. In this instance, with these rules, it is the interest of democracy that they are putting forward to ensure that everyone's voice is heard.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you. I'm not sure that qualifies as a compelling governmental interest in restricting the free speech of the people who are elected to represent their 70,000 plus constituents on this floor and what they were elected to do. And it certainly doesn't seem like the least restrictive means of achieving your desired goal or your stated goal. So I think we're going to have issues with that should this ever be challenged in a court of law. Second of all, you know, it's interesting that my colleague from Shelby County harkened back to the days of the American Revolution, because I don't see in these rules changes any rules with regard to access to this Capitol or this galleries. And you know, the father of the revolution, Sam Adams, one of his first things he did as a member of the Massachusetts legislature after they defeated the Stamp Act was to build galleries in the state legislature to be transparent and open to the people. We have limited participation and transparency in this government without even adopting so much as a rule formally to do so. And it's no coincidence that people are on the left and the special interests are on the right of the gallery. So let's be very clear about what is happening here. I have strong concerns about these rules. Finally, there's no amendment here to Rule 44 requiring the clerk to number the bills or resolutions that are filed with her. I filed multiple pieces of legislation that are not in our system and have no number. So I would like to understand why that is the case and there is no number to my legislation.
Lear Lambert.
So neither the capacity of the Capitol, which literally on the gold plaque in the back there, it has the capacity of this particular room, and there is a capacity of the Capitol from my understanding, but that is not addressed in these rules in any way, nor is the decision on whether or not a bill falls outside of the caption that the governor called us in for in these particular rules. So that is something that I would recommend, if you have not already, to take up with the clerk and their staff. They're extraordinarily competent, as you know, and they, I'm sure, can discuss with you why that was not accepted if it was not. I know members of both the Republican caucus and the Democratic caucus had bills that fell outside of the caption and were rejected by the clerk. And again, I trust them with decades of experience to make that determination. But this set of rules simply doesn't address either of those issues.
Okay, what's your primary question?
Well, the parliamentary inquiry is if members of this body introduce legislation to the clerk's office in a timely manner, it's to be filed for the public to see what was filed. I don't see any rule or anything allowing those not to be posted for public consumption. Whether they're allowed to be discussed in a committee or not, they still are filed with the clerk and are to be assigned a number expressly under Rule 44. And we have not amended that rule here today. So I would like to know why my legislation and my colleagues' legislation designed to address the issue for which this special session was supposed to be called is not even in the public record.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Article 3, Section 9, Section 9 of the Constitution. He may, on extraordinary occasions, referencing the governor, convene the General Assembly by proclamation, in which he shall state specifically the purpose for which they are to convene, but they shall enter on no legislative business except that for which they were specifically called together.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Shall enter into no legislative business. Therefore, you don't have to consider those bills, but we can certainly file the bills. No legislative business means you don't have to debate them or discuss them. And I understand that rule has been made without anybody else's input. But the reality is that those bills should at least be filed. Once filed with the clerk in a timely manner, they're to be assigned a number expressly by our House rules, therefore made public. They don't have to be taken up for legislative business or consideration, but they certainly were filed and should be assigned numbers. We're talking about nothing less here than governmental transparency. People need to know what's going on here.
Mr. Clark has answered your question. It's outside the caption. It's not going to be recorded. And you have the right to propose and put out whatever bills you want to on social media. Next, Representative Pearson.
Thank you. There was an article written sponsored called "Is Tennessee a Democracy?" And I believe today we are getting a very clear answer that it is not. This is not how democracies operate. If you want to talk about 1776, you realize that the people weren't cordoned off. If you want to talk about liberty and justice, you want to talk about the values of being a real American, is to know that the First Amendment comes first, and that our right to have freedom of speech is paramount in a democracy. And the rules that are being put forward now are to limit freedom of speech. And it is not just the freedom of speech of representatives. You are limiting the freedom of speech of our constituents. Constituents who come here and say, we want you to do something about the environment or about gun violence, about community safety. You, with these rules, are silencing our constituents' voices. And how? With these rules, it would be out of order for anyone in these galleries to have an 8 by 11 piece of paper that says do something, or protect kids, not guns, or ban assault rifles, or stop mass shootings and act. They would be unable to go into committee rooms for you to see what it is that they are concerned about. Some signs say, I'm a Republican voter for gun safety. You're saying with these rules that the folks who want you to know what they think are not deserving of being heard. That's not democracy. That's not who we are supposed to be. That is the abuse of power that got the country founded in the first place. This abuse of power through the rules that folks would be able to hearken back to and say, well, but they didn't follow the rules. But they didn't follow the rules. But they didn't follow the rules. But the rules were made unjustly. Many laws are being made unjustly. Many members being called out of order unjustly, and the opportunity to respond, to get your claim heard, is being taken away by these rules. And so for our constituents who are here and people who are in the galleries who've been forced to one side of the gallery so that lobbyists can be on the other side, are being denied the right to have their voices and their issues heard. And so I only have two questions. One is, where in these rules has it been made explicit that we were going to close one of the galleries to the public, from the public, and only allow press and media and lobbyists on one side, which hasn't happened before? My other question is back to what the former representative said. In these rules, have we changed it so that individuals with guns cannot come into Cordell Hall? Because that's a statement, even if you don't carry a sign.
Leader Lambert.
All right, so a lot to unpack there, and thank you for your comments. This is actually a constitutional federal republic. So I know that words democracy and republic get interchanged sometimes, but it is a constitutional federal republic. And I don't see any need for us to yell back and forth. I'm just going to make a few comments, and I'll respectfully listen to you if that's okay. I just would like to go back and forth. So the rules do not address the issue that you mentioned as far as firearms. They do address signs and other things, but these particular rules do not address that issue. There is ample security available in the Capitol through the THP. I see no reason why a member would be carrying a firearm, but that is not referenced within here. It is also not completely a free speech arena. This is not the public arena. So you can't just shout out anything you'd like or say anything. It is supposed to be on the subject that we're debating. Otherwise, it would devolve into chaos. The way that you have a republic is that each of us got elected to be the voice of roughly 70,000 people. And I would like to listen to your points, and I would ask that you respectfully listen to mine so that we can have an exchange of ideas. If more people did it in the world, in my humble opinion, we would solve a lot of these problems that we face. Just yelling at each other back and forth doesn't work. And I don't want to eat up all of the time for that representative. Is it possible to get, is there a way,
No,
Mr.
it is not. Leader Lambert, you got 5 minutes.
Mr. Clerk, is there a way that I can, in parliamentary inquiry, then on my part, is there a way that I can mention the member's name and give him an opportunity to respond to my comments? I did not intend to use up his time.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it's been the practice of this body that if a member's name is called, they are allowed to respond.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Speaker, and I would like to hear Representative Pearson's response to that. I do value his opinion. He represents the same number of folks that I do.
Representative Pearson.
Yep, I appreciate that. But what concerns me still with this, with these rules, is that it is creating processes to dilute the voices of people. say that representatives who get to this house have to act in a certain way, as some of the folks here have articulated. Our constituents who are coming here demanding that we act, demanding that we do something, demanding that they be heard, are being told that they aren't allowed to even have a piece of paper. Why are we scared of a sign? What is the sign going to do to you and our children? Nothing, because it's not about the sign. Just like some of these rules, it's not about keeping decorum. This is about power. And this is the misuse of governmental power and the abuse of power on the minority party. A lot of people who studied federalism and government, you know, the factions, the people who advocated that the minority always have a voice, but this is what's going to happen. And I'll go to the rules here. You have at 2, in the third paragraph, that if a member causes a material disruption to order under this rule, and the House shall decide the case without debate. Where is the democracy in that? If you say, as you just did with this extension of time opportunity, that it allows us to go back and forth, to talk through things, to figure things out, why is it that you all and the Rules Committee have put forward rules that can have members silenced without debate? It's not just there in the rules. As it relates to order in the gallery, the power of the people is disrupted. Any case of any disturbance or disorderly conduct in the gallery or lobby, the speaker or the chair of the committee of the whole shall have power to order the same to be cleared. There's not even a vote without debate. Again, if sustained by the House is another phrase that's used. If a member's remarks aren't exactly to the liking of one of these members in this building, they say if sustained by the House, if sustained by the House. So that means that people who are in the majority party can silence people without any votes from anyone else. Where's the democracy? If we are going to be true to the ideals, the ideas that folks are articulating, we have to vote against these rules in order that we might pass rules toward justice, that we might pass legislation that addresses the needs that got us here in the first place. And it wasn't to tell people not to bring signs that say, "Am I next?" and do something and ban assault weapons. That wasn't the purpose. It was to lift up the voices of people who can't speak anymore due to gun violence. And instead, it's becoming a bludgeon of an abuse of power by the members who passed this. So I ask everyone, if you do care about democracy, if you do care about the amendments, care about the First Amendment, or we're going to continue to see the folks who are already marginalized and mistreated and told to sit down and told they're out of order, we're going to see that being rubber stamped with rules. And that is immoral and that is wrong.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I only have 20 seconds left, but thank you for your comments. And again, the purpose of these rules is to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and it allows for smaller responses to even larger issues in an actual continuum instead of all or nothing.
Representative McKenzie. That was his time, not your time. Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think I heard on the second time that it was asked that guns are allowed in committee rooms. Let me ask that question directly. Are guns allowed in our committee rooms? Please answer yes or no if you don't mind.
Leader Lambert.
So there is nothing in this rule that addresses that. I will tell you that in the Court of the Whole building, the rules of that particular building is that firearms are allowed in that building. In this particular building, it is my understanding that, at least what I've always been told, is that the governor makes a decision coming into this particular building on the first floor, and that firearms are not allowed in this building. But again, in the Court of the Whole building, definitely firearms are allowed by law-abiding citizens that are obviously permitted to have them. But in this building, as a general rule, they are not.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, and thank you for that answer, because it gets to what my colleague from Putnam County asked. What he said, and the clerk followed up with an affirmative, is that the rules in the galleries permeate to the committee rooms. You all deferred to the clerk, and he clearly answered that the rules of the galleries permeate to the committee room. So let me ask the question of the clerk. Does that now mean that guns are not allowed or never have been allowed in the committee rooms? Because you clearly said that the interpretation of the spirit of the law is that our rules permeate into committee rooms.
Leader Lambert or Representative Garrett, whichever. I think Representative Garrett wants to answer that question. Let's let him try.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committees have the ability to adopt their policy as it relates to their audiences. If there is an issue that comes up in a committee and their rules are silent, the rule that defaults to are our House rules that apply in the committees. So whatever rules that we pass here today or that are in effect today, if there is no rule in a committee or it's silent as it relates to that subject matter, the House floor rules prevail in the committee.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm going to ask this question of the clerk, because I don't think it was answered by the sponsor of this bill, because there is a rule that says guns are not allowed on the House floor. So it's not silent. So my question to the clerk is, as you talked about the spirit of signs and banners and buttons are not allowed, does that permeate, does that include guns?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, there is no rule in the legislative rules of procedure that address the carrying of firearms.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let me get to quick question. These rules only apply to the extraordinary session that we're currently in, correct? Please don't run the clock out on me.
Representative Garrett.
Yes.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you. So, that's what I'll get to. We've already honed this thing down to 5 minutes. You've gone 15 minutes to 5. Please, this session, let's allow 5 minutes worth of good debate. And I applaud the leader for doing that. So thank you for that previous conversation. My last question, and this is extremely important because a lot of power, as we know, does and should reside with the speaker. But I want to fully understand what can get our members sideways. So I need to clearly understand what a material disruption of legislative business is. We need a clear definition to where we're getting close to it, we're over it, we've jumped through it, but it can't be arbitrary. Right now, as it stands, it's arbitrary. So we need a clear definition of what the material disruption is, looks like, a few examples. Thank you. Please.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had several times where we're in a particular order of the day, whether it's welcoming and honoring, whether it's unfinished business, or whatever the case may be. And if you have a constituent that comes in late and you wanted to welcome them, and that time has passed and we're in unfinished business, or whatever the case may be, there are times that you may get the speaker's attention and say, Mr. Speaker, I know I'm out of order, but I'd like to welcome such and such to the House chamber. I didn't get a chance to in welcoming and honoring. That's not a material disruption, right? You are technically, and you would admit, several of us have done that's out of order, right? But that's not going to be a material disruption of the proceedings. I think we witnessed one that happened a couple of weeks ago. No matter your feelings on that, when you come to the well of the House when we are in session and you stop the proceedings for over an hour, that is a material disruption of this House. That's one example. There could be others that we could hypothetically get into. I could talk all day about certain things that could happen that a member could materially disrupt someone for doing the business that their districts sent them here to do. And under these rules, we've got to have something that says you can't one person, one member of this House of Representatives stop the proceedings to silence over 7 million Tennesseans, and there be no repercussions for that whatsoever, except the two things that we had, which was an expulsion or a censure, which again, everyone begged for something else rather than that, and that's exactly what these rules are designed to do. So the material disruption is at the discretion of the Speaker. And I obviously can't speak for the Speaker, but it's going to be something that you saw 2 or 3 months ago when we witnessed the overtaking of this well back in April. That, for me to define it, is something what would rise to the level of a material disruption of this House, not something where you're asking someone to be welcomed when we're not on welcoming and honoring.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for the record, I wanted to clear up this unanimous vote on these rules. We took a voice vote, and so the voice vote carried. Secondly, under Rule 2, as it currently stands in our rules, the Speaker has the discretion. The Speaker can take you off a committee. The Speaker can take your chairmanship. The Speaker can put you in a closet. There are things that the Speaker can do without just saying it's only censure and expulsion. So the Speaker has the power right now to keep decorum on the House floor. I remember some years ago when Speaker Williams was voted the Speaker of the House. Man, it was crazy in here. People was jumping over tables, ready to hurt somebody, threatening members. Some of us got threatened from other members. Those were violent acts. What he said we witnessed a couple of months ago was a peaceful act of just saying, let the people be heard. Oh, yes. And people, members, they had their weapons on them in this chamber. And they was coming across the table, threatening to, I hurt you for your vote, for what you did to us. We didn't have a bunch of rules to change it. We didn't say we're going to change it and do all of this stuff, but that's where we are right now, unfortunately. We worked it out. Members came to members and said, I was wrong for that. Members talked the next several days about what had transpired. And out of respect for one another, we dealt with it. We just said we're going to just change the entire system because of one incident when Kent Williams was elected Speaker. And right up here was a big banner. It was rolled up, and it was going to roll out depending on the vote. It didn't go the way it was expected to go, so it never rolled down. But people understood, okay, we can handle that. We could deal with that. We didn't change the rule because the Speaker had the power to decide how he was going to manage his House floor, how he was going to put members together to work it out. And you have that same power right now, Mr. Speaker, to do that. We don't have to go this far to achieve the goals that we want in this body. And we have respect for one another where we could be able to work it out. But for some reason, we're at this place right now of these extreme wings. We got to go to the extreme measure versus compromising, having a conversation, working it out. We need to get back to that. We need to get back to working with each other to solve these problems and not going as I put it, off the cliff. My colleague told me, well, no, you created the cliff. Mr. Speaker and members, I'm asking all of us to just stop for a moment and take a deep breath. And let's just see if we can work these things through without limiting people's ability to talk, without limiting the voices of the people who want to be here and just want to be heard. Because when we do that, we create more problems than we solve. And then we'll come back with another set of rules to try to fix that problem that we didn't necessarily have to begin with. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert, Representative Garrett, anything? Nope. Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of the committee's recommendation that we adopt these rules. You know, rules exist for two reasons. One is to provide order. Second, to promote civility. These rules do that exceptionally well. There's been a suggestion here this afternoon that these rules are somehow un-American or anti-democratic. Nothing could be further from the truth. As you all know, our rules incorporate Mason's Manuals of Legislative Procedure. That's Rule 79 of our House rules. Mason's, in turn, in Section 122, incorporates Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Legislative Procedure. And Jefferson had one rule in particular that we ought to listen to, because there was no one more American or democratic than Thomas Jefferson, especially at the time of the founding of our nation. Jefferson said this: "No one is to speak impertinently, beside the question, superfluously, or tediously." That was Jefferson's rule of legislative procedure. Now, we've got 86 rules, but it seems to me that Thomas Jefferson summed it up very nicely. No one is to speak impertinently. That means you speak with respect. You act civilly. You speak civilly. No one is to speak beside the question. That means you stay on the bill. You stay on the topic. No one is to speak superfluously. You speak about relevant points. You don't go off on a tangent. You don't speak superfluously. And then finally, no one is to speak tediously, meaning that you don't repeat yourself. You get up in a legislative debate, you make your point, and then you sit down and allow others to speak. Why? Because, as Leader Lamberth was saying a moment ago, these rules provide equality for all 99 members who represent 7 million Tennesseans. So I say, ladies and gentlemen, Thomas Jefferson had it right. In this chamber, we speak civilly. We do not speak impertinently. We do not speak beside the question. We do not speak superfluously, and we do not speak tediously. Now, does someone who speaks uncivilly have a right to continue speaking? Not in my view, they don't, respectfully. If a member cannot conduct the member's self with civility, the member ought to sit down. We ought to have teeth to these rules. These rules, frankly, are needed in this chamber now more than ever. In fact, the debate that we've had over the past hour, I think, has shown our great state and our nation why these rules are necessary. Because the rules are being attacked baselessly as un-American, as anti-democratic. These rules go back to the foundation of our republic. I urge every one of you to adopt them.
Representative Garrett, Leader Lamberth.
Thank you for your comments.
Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, I've said this a number of times on this floor. some of what I heard today, I agree with. A lot of it I do not agree with. Democracy has always been a messy business. Democracy in this country or democracy around the world has always been a messy business. You got many members on this floor who have been in the military, all over the world, espousing what it is that we believe in this country in the name of democracy, holding up the bloodstained banner of democracy. And it's a messy business. The War of 1612, Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, on and on and on and on and on. World War I, World War II, all of it is a messy business. Now, what I see is this. I'm for the debate in a respectful manner for all of us. All of us should be respectful towards each other. I've been in this body for a while, and we have respected each other on the House floor. Sometimes people get hot around the collar. Y'all ever heard of that? People get hot around the collar about some things sometimes. Don't mean they hate each other. Mean they're trying to get the word out. When you study history, though, suppressing the people, whether you want to call this the people or the people out there, is never a good idea. There's always a groundswell eventually, because the people are going to eventually rise above it and take their own action. It's not a wise idea. What we need in this body are people that have the wisdom of the ages to teach us how to get along when we don't agree with each other. See, it's easy to talk to your children, your friend, your classmate, or your large brothers when it's something that they agree with. The test becomes when you cannot agree. What do we do? Put them in the guillotine? Make them walk the hot coals? Put them out on the desert, this 110-degree temperature we got there? No, you need the wisdom and the civility of learning how to deal with it. Now, it's painful. It's definitely disruptive sometimes, but that's democracy, ladies and gentlemen. It's never going to change. Democracy is a messy business. It has been a messy business. It will continue to be a messy business. And there are other things we could have done. If we were in a war right now fighting, and I'm the commander of this room, I want everybody in here's input to figure out how we're going to win. You're fighting for your state. How are we going to make it more effective? There's not a man or woman on this floor that does not want to do something about gun violence. Thugs want safety. They don't want to get shot. Everybody wants the same thing. Now, the way and avenue that we try to approach it is totally different, but everybody wants to be safe. It's not unreasonable. But without the conversation, we'll never get there. I submit to you that conversations rules the nation. Conversations rule the nation because you have to communicate. You're a top general, you got to communicate to your troops. You think the troops love everything you say? No, they don't. They follow through and they do it. We must be able to talk. Silencing the people is never a good idea. Now, can the people go too far? Sometimes they do. That's what rules are for sometimes. Okay? Can I go too far? Of course I can. Anybody can go too far. But by the same token, you should want to hear what I have to say. When people pipe down, as old folks say, cool down and settle down, you tend to get something out of it if you want to. But when I make it a vengeance and I want to be retaliatory, I'm just mad, I'm angry about it, I can't get to it. We're still going to have to figure out how to resolve some of these problems. And I'm going to submit to you the conversation rules the nation. We need to have more conversation about these things. We need to learn how to be more civil towards each other. We've done it before. We can do it again. And if we don't need it now, I don't know when in the world we're ever going to need it. We need it now. Speaker, thank you.
Larry Lamberth, Representative Garrett. Nope. Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. There's objection. We're on the board. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 67, 27 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of adopting the report of the Ad hoc Committee on Rules as the permanent rules for the order for the first extraordinary session, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 73, 23 nays.
The rules are adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring. Anyone seeking recognition? Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to take the opportunity, as we all know, this summer we lost our dear friend and colleague, Representative Bill Beck. Before I ask just for a moment of silence to think about him and his family, and I'd just like to add the granddaughter, his first grandchild, that he was so excited about. If you talk to him, that's the first thing he told you about. She was just born last week. And so before we have a moment of silence for that blessed child and that family, I want to take this opportunity to represent the gentleman who was appointed by our Metro Council to temporarily fill his seat, Mr. Anthony Davis. If you would all welcome Mr. Representative Davis for me. Thanks, brother. Representative Davis will serve us well this week. He comes to us from extensive experience in the Metro Council and a long time of community service here in Nashville, and he has a wonderful family himself. But if you would now join me in a moment of silence, and afterwards, I would encourage you all to please sign on to the resolution that we have, a House Joint Resolution that has been filed to memorialize our dear friend, Representative Bill Beck. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to honor Ryan McDonald. Today is the 15th anniversary, August 21st, 2008, when we had a shooting at Central High School. Both police officers were in the cafeteria when it happened. Ryan McDonald was 15 years old. He's a fun kid, kind of a jokester. He was always cutting up. He was one of our special education students. I was sitting in my classroom preparing for the morning. Kids were always in the cafeteria having breakfast until bell. And I happened to look up the hill and I saw kids running towards me, screaming, terrified. Came in my room, kids I didn't know, kids that were in my class. Took a few minutes for them to be able to tell me what happened. Some of them watched their friend Ryan take his last breath there in the cafeteria. We have to do something. We have to do it for Ryan, and we have to do it for everybody since and everybody in the future. And I'm begging you all to open your hearts for Ryan and for everyone else. Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome the people assembled on the Capitol grounds, in the rotunda, in the plaza, around their televisions and laptops, who are holding their children a bit tighter today. People wondering, perhaps for the first time, if the government for, by, and in service to the people will deliver for them the change they have begged for, the change that has been delayed 4 months since the Covenant shooting. May they be witnesses to change during this special session. I want to welcome Tennesseans, old and tired, young and fed up, to the People's House to petition their government, because change is a constant fight, democracy a common struggle, and the continuation of the people's hope is the light which guides us toward the promise of freedom. May they shine light on the path forward during this special session. I want to welcome to the people's house the spirit of progress, whose presence reminds us that the only constant is change. The breath of change held in the lungs of those singing their resistance, screaming their frustration, speaking their truth to power, whispering their promise to those they love. The breath passed from parent to child as they set off to school. The breath passed between congregants and houses of worship. May they breathe life into this special session. I want to welcome the people to the people's house, those who have been ignored for too long, whose voices have fallen on hardened hearts and ears too busy listening to the promise of campaign contributions to remember those who they swore to serve. May they finally be heard this session. I want to welcome the memory of Evelyn, Mike, William, Catherine, Cynthia, Haley. May we remember their names and those they leave behind. I welcome them here, many of their loved ones and memory carriers assembled in the galleries above. May they find peace during this special session. I welcome the memories and histories and possibilities which combine to form our movement. Welcome all to the people's house. May we write love letters with the policies we pass during this special session to future generations. I'm sorry to those who are watching and gathered here today that I have to welcome you to a special session marred by policy violence and extremist performance. I'm sorry that the loved ones you lost cannot be here with us today because of senseless violence that is allowed to continue because of policy decisions, refusing to see the lives of children as more important than the weapons of war that we've allowed to pollute our streets. But most importantly and lastly, I want to welcome into the people's house the generational promise of justice, passed from the moment of the first people resisted on this land of Tennessee until now, those who stewarded by their emboldened call to stand for the disenfranchised, the marginalized, and neglected. I want to welcome the voice of the people to the people's house. I want to honor those who we've lost. I've seen Michonne L. Brooks, whose son Akila was killed in the Waffle House shooting in this gallery. I want to welcome all those who've lost their loved ones during this session and let them know that these people who you see gathered on my side are on the wrong side of history. But the spirit of history, the spirit of our Creator, something greater than us, will move them out the way sooner or later. Change is coming to Tennessee. Change is coming to Tennessee. Change is coming to Tennessee. And no rule change can stop it. No silencing of microphones can silence the voice that has rised up in this state. And so I have hope. I have hope for the young people who are watching us today. I have hope for those who are yet born, who are counting on us today. I have hope. I have hope in something beyond a supermajority, beyond the extremist policies of this body. And I'm going to take a moment of silence as our members speak, because they don't want to hear. They don't want to hear. They don't want to hear, but give them ears to hear today. Give them eyes to see the harm that they've created with their policies. Give them stillness to process the grief that has brought us here for this special session. I'm going to take a moment of silence. Let it be so.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On last Saturday, we funeralized a Knoxville icon, Coach Bob Black. He coached for my rival school, Fulton, which is in Representative Johnson's district. But this man loved children. He was a strong coach, a strong man. 50 years, he was really an iconic figure, ran the junior pro basketball program across the nation. Just a, he's one of those once in a generational kind of figures. Had his son end up coaching at his school. But just want to take a moment of silence to recognize Coach Bob Black and his family during their time of bereavement. So thank you. Thank you.
Representative Pearson.
to this gallery of people who continue to fight, who have marched today, have signs today asking for us to do something. The greatest sign is your presence, that this status quo is not working, and that if we don't do something, we are going to continue to lead this state in the most gun violence death. We're going to lead this country in the top 10 gun violence deaths. Our children's number one cause of death will still be gun violence if we don't do something. And so to the people who believe and the people who show up day after day and who are here with high hopes for this special session, who refuse to be silenced and refuse to be pushed to the periphery, thank you. This is our house. This is the people's house, and you all belong here. And your voices and your ideas are worthy, and your stories are worthy of true consideration. You do not deserve rules that try and silence you, that try and stop and hinder our democracy. But as always, we must march on and press on to build the state that's better for everybody anyway. And to the mothers, the fathers, the aunts, and the uncles who I know are here, who held vigil yesterday and spoke today, mothers like Mrs. Lavonda Thorne Henderson, whose son Larry Thorne was killed because of gun violence. Mothers like too many in our community who have suffered because of inaction and because of an unwillingness to have moral courage. To all of you who are here, aunts and uncles, I honor you because our fight for a better Tennessee is still worth it. There will be people who always push against it, who fight against it, who uphold white supremacy and patriarchy and injustice. They'll always be here, but we must always be here too, fighting and pushing back with everything that we've got. And so to you who have cried and have mourned together, we will continue to fight on to make this state what it ought to be, although it is not yet there. And so let this special session still be our rallying call to end gun violence, to choose people over profits, and to lift up the voices of people who can't speak anymore. Because the people who can do something only want to offer empty thoughts and prayers. Let us fight on until that assured victory is won.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. On July 9th of this year, I lost a mentor. He's a state senator and a state representative, Roy Herron. Roy Herron served in this House for 10 years. He served in the state Senate for 16 years. I was fortunate enough when I was a freshman in college, barely 18 years old, to be an intern for Representative Herron. In fact, I was even put in the same office that I interned with Roy in when I was first elected to the House. We lost Roy way too young. I just wanted to have a little moment of silence for Roy Herron. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, two things. First one is my colleague, my chairman, talked about our beloved brother Beck, our dearly departed brother, and he was certainly exhilarated. It's beautiful to see a man or a woman that really loves their family and their children, but he's so excited about that grandbaby that it was contagious. And I'm just wondering, Chairman, that the baby is born. Might need to see if we get the mama to bring the baby up here and introduce him to all his uncles and aunts up here and get a little photo with the baby. for the daughter. The daughter knew it. The mother knew it. His wife knew it. So it'd be great to see if we can have that child up here at his desk and just kind of, shower a little love on the child. Secondly, a moment of silent prayer. As you all know, I don't have to share this with you. You know it already. The greatest fires in our country happen in Maui. And I'm so glad my friends were not over there. I hate this has happened to anybody. It's a frightening situation. And we go there. I mean, members in this house, we've been there back and forth. Members have served, been there. And we need to reach out, figure out how we're going to help them rebuild and make them whole. That is a frightening situation, sir. If you don't mind, I'd just like just a little moment of silence. Prayer for them, the Maui. Amen. Thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, many of you all know I'm running for another office. And my best friend, campaign manager, I've been known for probably 45 years of my life. He passed on August the 6th. And ironically enough, that day, it's a group of us that were at UT together, and the other one of us that are still here, it was her birthday. So it was a tough day for us. And God's been good. He's been blessing us through it. But he's in a better place. And I just would like you all to keep me and our families in your prayers. So just a moment of silence for him, his family. My family's been so close to him over the years. Just a moment of silence. I appreciate it, Mr. Speaker, members. Thank you. His name was Ronald Taylor. Thank you.
Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, on Saturday, this past Saturday, we had to go through the agonizing duel of burying my brother-in-law, Antonio Theus, who died from the grips of the very gun violence that I thought we'd be talking about here today. So I want to have a moment of silence for Antonio Theus, who was a caring father, who was a brother, who was a son, and who was a person who was trying to do the best for their community. But that person's life was taken because someone was trying to steal their vehicle, and they didn't want them to take their vehicle. So I ask that you all have this moment of silence with me, and also, if we're not able to do it during this special session in the coming months, when we get ready to come back, let's make sure that we talk about, at least have the conversation about some of the things that's ripping our neighborhoods apart. So, a moment of silence. Thank you.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of resolutions.
Senator Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Senator Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing in line that has been placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Senator Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Senator Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bills 1 through 102 be introduced and passed on first consideration.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on first consideration, Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions, memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars, unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the rules be suspended for immediate introduction and consideration of HJR 40.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
House Joint Resolution 40 by Representative Ritchie, a resolution to provide for the adjournment sine die of the first extraordinary session of the 113th General Assembly.
There is objection. We have a second. We're on the board. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote no. On the objection, right. We're voting on the objection. Right. So we are voting to suspend the rules. There's an objection for it to be heard. We're going to vote whether or not to suspend the rules, which takes 2/3 of the body to vote to suspend. An aye vote votes to suspend to hear the resolution. A no vote votes not to suspend to hear it. All those members vote when the bell rings. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye 6, 85 nays.
Having failed to receive 2/3 majority of the vote to suspend the rules, fails. We're under unfinished business. Representative Hardaway, I failed to see you recognized under prior. Was there something you'd like to say, sir?
There was, Speaker. However, I don't even see her, so I'll wait until tomorrow to introduce you to Clara Hutton.
Yes, sir.
I'll handle it tomorrow.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you,
My
sir.
apologies. I didn't see you raise your hand. Representative Jones, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I'm rising to seek clarification on a letter that was sent to your office regarding committee assignments. If members who were stripped of their committee will be restored to the committees that they're...
Representative Jones, now's not the time for that. You're out of order. Mr. Clerk, next order, please.
Announcements.
Announcements. Any announcements? Seeing none. Next order.
Roll call.
Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 96 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until 9 a.m. on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 9 a.m. on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023.